Hi everyone! Today I'm continuing my series on MBTI types paired with several Enneagram types, and I'm going to talk about the ENFJ. The most common Enneagram types for the ENFJ are generally 2 and 3, but we can also, and we will also talk about Enneagram 6, 8, and 9, which I believe would be the second most common group of types for the ENFJ. We will look at what are the differences between all of these pairings and some insights or some helpful tips and tricks that can help us figure out what the Enneagram type of a specific ENFJ is. So all about that in the next few minutes. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. Okay, so the most common, the most often association with the ENFJ is Enneagram 2. The helper or the giver. Most ENFJs that I know, offline and online, are an Enneagram 2, either a 2ing 1 or a 2ing 3, or at least they have Enneagram 2 in their tri-type as one of their fixes. Why? Well, because Enneagram 2 is literally a very close description of extroverted feeling as a function. Most Enneagram 2s are FJ types and most ENFJs are Enneagram 2. I believe that out of almost all of the MBTI types, ENFJs and ESFJs are probably the ones who are the most likely to be one specific Enneagram type, and that is Enneagram 2. Whereas we have other types where we find a more, let's say, even distribution with respect to the Enneagram types. Here, because in my opinion, extroverted feeling and Enneagram 2 are very much alike in the way that we understand and describe these processes, even more so than any other combination. Because you'll say that, oh, Enneagram 7 very much correlates with both NE and SE, or Enneagram 8 with SE or with TE, etc., etc. But here, there's no other cognitive function that correlates so well with Enneagram 2 than extroverted feeling. So the ENFJ 2 will be your most typical, stereotypical version of the ENFJ. Being the helper or the giver, this person will be very much focused on anticipating other people's needs, understanding how other people feel, understanding what is important to other people, doing things to help others first while neglecting their own needs and their own problems and their own issues. Of course, a more, let's say, unhealthy version of this type will represent someone who tends to be very prideful about the fact that they do so much for other people, that they always prioritize other people, which of course in time can lead to a lot of resentment. At the same time, a healthier version of this type, of this combination, will really reflect an individual who is really good at focusing on other people, helping other people, but at the same time also taking care of themselves. Okay. Now, I also mentioned Enneagram 3 because a lot of ENFJs can be 2ing 3, and some of them are 3-wing 2. This is another pairing that I noticed quite a lot. This version of the ENFJ sometimes mistypes as an ENTJ or an ENTP or even ESTP. Why? Because they tend to be a bit more performance-oriented, achievement-oriented. They tend to be very hardworking, industrious, and they care a lot about work-related aspects. And because of that reason, they can appear to be a bit more intimidating, a bit more decisive and direct than an Enneagram 2 ENFJ. Enneagram 3 is still part of the feeling triad. It is still very much concerned with understanding their identity, their social image, etc., etc. However, they are more focused on proving to other people that they are actually highly competent. Not necessarily in the sense that Enneagram 5 would do, but more so in the sense of, I want to show to the world that I'm outstanding, that my work is excellent, that I'm very good at what I do, perhaps the best at what I do. And they tend to struggle more with fear of failure. They tend to struggle more with feeling like they're not enough as individuals if their work is not valuable enough, or if their work is not appreciated by other people enough. So again, this can make them think sometimes that they are a thinking type. I would say ENTJ is the most common mistype here. Now, I would say most ENFJs are a 2-wing 3 or a 3-wing 2. These tend to be the most common patterns, but like I said earlier, 6, 8, 9, and even 1, which I forgot to mention at the beginning, can come up. I would say that 4 and 5 are the most unlikely types. 7 sometimes happens, but again, it's not really that common. The Enneagram 6 ENFJ is a pairing that tends to sometimes make this person believe that maybe they're an introverted sensing type, so an ESFJ perhaps, or it can make them think they're an INFJ because they're slightly less socially extroverted than an Enneagram 2 or an Enneagram 3 ENFJ. The Enneagram 6 ENFJ will tend to appear as a little bit more anxious, more likely to worry about things, more likely to try to plan ahead and come up with different scenarios of how things could go wrong and prepare for those potential scenarios. Enneagram 6 ENFJs struggle more with anxiety about a lot of different areas of their lives, relationships, work, etc., and they are not so much concerned with their image, which is something that is more obvious in the Enneagram 2 and the Enneagram 3. Enneagram 8 ENFJs are not that common. I know a couple. Again, they might sometimes mistype as ENTJ or ENTP or even ESTP because, we know that Enneagram 8 is a more decisive, assertive Enneagram type. And even though ENFJ is also a control type, if we look at the interaction style model by Linda Burns, and when we put these things two together, the ENFJ as a control type and the Enneagram 8, we will find an even more direct, even more assertive, even more in control person, which a lot of the times can look from the outside like extroverted thinking, hence the ENTJ mistype. But if we dig a little deeper, we notice that it's actually extroverted feeling and introverted thinking. Or perhaps extroverted feeling and extroverted sensing working together and somewhat resembling TE, extroverted thinking. I feel like, okay, this is just my opinion, but I feel like in a lot of TV shows, there's characters that are actually ENFJs or ESFJs, but because they're an Enneagram 8, they appear to be ENTJ or ESTJ. Because the extroverted feeling energy is not as warm or approachable as we stereotypically expect it to be. It's a little bit pushier. And also these people sometimes want to appear as very strong and in control, which makes them, resemble a more stereotypical TE hero type, ENTJ, ESTJ. Anyway, back on track. I also mentioned that some ENFJs can be 9 or 1. Again, I would say these are less likely. They sometimes occur, but definitely not as frequently as the 2, the 3, or even the 6. The Enneagram 9 ENFJ is a bit more socially introverted, tends to be a bit more relaxed, peaceful, calm, and tends to value their inner peace and serenity even more. I would say that this kind of ENFJ is even more likely to be interested in spiritual practices, religion maybe to a certain extent, although not necessarily. They're also more likely to be perceived as hipsters and could even mistype as an ENFP or an INFP. The Enneagram 1 ENFJ again appears to be more socially introverted, which could lead to them thinking they're an INFJ instead or another introverted type. They will be more perfectionistic, more likely to have extremely high expectations and standards for both themselves and other people. Okay, so these are my thoughts on ENFJ paired up with different Enneagram types. Again, 2 and 3 are really the most common pairings, highly likely, and 6 is also a strong candidate. Sometimes we notice an 8 or a 9 or a 1 pairing. And of course, 7, 4 are also possible, but quite unlikely, whereas 5 is the one that I believe is the most unlikely possibility. Are you an ENFJ? If you are, or if you know anyone in your life who is an ENFJ, what is their Enneagram type? Or what do you think their Enneagram type is? Feel free to share your thoughts below. As always, thanks a lot for watching this video. Thanks a lot for being with me, and see you next week with another video on typology.